What is going on, everybody? Welcome in to the final positional rankings for the 2025 NFL draft here. Wanted to bring my good friend Garrett of the Football Analysis channel on to talk about the Hog Mollies, baby. I texted you today, so this is a little bit of an impromptu show, but you were like, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to talk about the big beefies. And I was like, okay, give me 15 minutes to shave. And then I grabbed the razor and I was like, we're talking about offensive linemen. Why throw this thing out? We don't need to shave the neck beard for this one. This is fitting. So thank you for joining us. And how you doing, buddy? A week before the draft here.
I'm good. I'm ready for it to be here. Now I kind of have to just force a joke here. I did not have the contemplation of whether I had to shave or not. So I didn't have that similar thought before the taping, but I'm ready. Just as I've just grown more and more of a fan and just, and more into the scouting game, if you will, I love watching O-line tape, whether it's tackles, guards, centers. I love talking O-line tape. So I'm looking forward to this one.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I was watching a little bit of the Wolves game with some friends last night, and they were asking me, what's the last position you're working on? I told them offensive line, and they were like, oh, that sounds boring. And I'm like, actually, I enjoy it, especially after doing linebackers and safeties, which are both, I think, the hardest and most boring position to watch. At least like they're hitting somebody every play, and it's, there's action going on. So very excited to get into this. So I'm going to be going in terms of the format here, just to update you guys how this is going to work. We are going to kind of first reveal my ranking of the player and go starting at the top down, beginning with offensive tackles. And then we will talk about interior offensive line. And then basically I'm going to pass it off to Garrett to expand with his thoughts on the guy. And then there's a few players that Garrett's pretty fired up about that I'm going to let him start on. So that's kind of the show order here. We are going to start with offensive tackles. And my number one, first off, we are opening tier 1 of offensive tackles. And I have 4 players in this tier, all with first round grades here. So these guys are all actually pretty tightly knit. But my number 1 offensive tackle, I'm keeping Josh Simmons as my number 1 offensive tackle out of Ohio State. The huge kicker here is coming off of the patellar tendon injury that was suffered midseason. Obviously, sitting here in our desks, in our basements, we don't know. We don't know how well he's going to recover, when he's going to be available, how well he's going to be able to move off of that. I'm playing an optimistic hand here, if you will. But what I do know is watching these top 4 offensive tackles, I feel strongest that he is the best tackle in this draft, frankly, the best offensive lineman in this draft. I was obsessed with his tape and his athleticism, the way he moves, extremely fluid athlete, explosive into his kick sets to get that depth, but the reactionary quickness and the agility to cut off inside moves, to latch and mirror. He just had that franchise left tackle pass blocking ability. But it wasn't just his feet. His hands are tremendous. The accuracy with his hands to hit them inside, but he breaks out the advanced hand techniques as well. He'll flash a hand and pull it back to screw up the defensive lineman, and then he'll come back and strike. He does the snatch trap technique, which is a favorite of mine. Just like advanced technique in pass protection. I saw a lot of a young David Bakhtiari when I was watching him as a Packers fan. I really did. And then as a run blocker, he's frankly not bad. He gets off the ball. He's definitely going to be good for wide zone blocking schemes. Not the largest frame, not the most length, and not the best play strength. I think it's functional. I think he can, like a young David Bakhtiari, be just fine as a run blocker, but maybe never going to be a defining strength in his game, unless you are one of those heavy wide zone blocking systems where I do think he can thrive getting out on the move. So obviously the injury, a huge kicker there, but I'm going to kind of call my shot. If he can get back healthy, I do think he will be the best offensive tackle in this draft. Garrett, your thoughts?
I love Josh Simmons. I slightly disagree on the best tackle, and we'll obviously discuss a couple of more tackles here in a minute. My tackle that is my number 1 will be quickly approaching, but I agree with everything you said. disagree a little bit on the, or not disagree, but I think a comp for me that I loved was Christian Darrisaw of the Vikings. I think both are, but for every reason that you said for Bakhtiari, just the anchor isn't. I mean, it's not like, you're like Anthony Belton or well, Anthony Belton got beat by James Pierce, but it's not Tyler Booker where you're running into a brick wall. But it is adequate. It is above average. He's a great athlete, especially for the left tackle position, and he allowed a single pressure in 2024 on 150 pass blocking snaps. And I know all pass blocking reps are not created equal, but to me, he is by every definition a franchise left tackle. And I do think that he will at some points early on get beat the same way a young Christian Darrisaw did. I think back to a 2021 game on Monday night where a prime Robert Quinn that I think had 18 sacks that year or something double digit, where he took him to school on Monday night. There was one rep in particular where he absolutely got the best of Darrisaw, but I think there's going to be a couple reps like that from Simmons early on. But to me, the hand usage was really good, like Darrisaw's was at Virginia Tech, and it's only improved as he's progressed in the league. And Darrisaw also not, I mean, at least early on, was not an elite run blocker by any means, although he has improved. And I think the same way, or the same trajectory will happen with Josh Simmons too. And if you told me right now that he would be the best tackle in this class, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I love his game. And the expectation is that he will be ready by the start of the 2025 season. So I'm looking forward to where he goes on night one. And I think, unfortunately, because of the injury, that there's a chance that somebody gets him well past where he should actually be drafted if he were injury free.
Yeah, worst case for all of us, somebody that wears red jerseys and plays in the Super Bowl every year that really needs a franchise left tackle. Yeah, that would just be incredible. Any team, into the 20s, it's very realistic. Like it's likely that he's going to be there. And I understand that, putting him as my number one tackle. And I understand, being a little bit more scared of that, but I wanted to kind of leave him there with a statement of like, I have questions about the rest of these guys. I really, other than the health, don't on Josh Simmons, but it's a big question mark as well, which is why these guys are all pretty tightly knit. So my number 2 offensive tackle is Armond Membou out of Missouri. So again, true first round grade, totally understand him going inside the top 10 as well. Just a rare combination of athleticism and size. Now his length is a little bit less than you would prefer to see. He's about 6'3.5", 6'4", 33.5-inch arms. I love those shorter tackles that have longer arms that can kind of get natural, easy leverage. That's not necessarily him. Like, he's shorter and his arm length is just okay. And actually watching his tape, and I don't love to start with negatives on these guys, but I actually did feel like the length impacted him at times, especially in the run game. I think not just the lack of length, but I think his accuracy with his hands needs to get better. It felt like a lot of times he was fighting with his hands outside, and it's harder to move guys, especially once he's going against NFL tackles or defensive ends rather. So that was just one area where it's like, I wish his hands were a little bit better in the run game. But as a pass protector, all the athleticism with his feet, I think he's better with his hands in pass protection. Consistently plays with the technique where he's gonna strike with that outside hand because he does have very powerful strikes, and he's gonna keep that offhand basically ready to counter. Whether you try to fire into his chest to hit him with a bull rush, or you want to hit an inside counter, he's ready to cut any of that stuff off and fight back with that second hand. But because he uses that technique so often, he'll vary that up so that he's not doing it every single time. He'll kind of do the reverse ghost move as a tackle. He'll act like he's going to fire that outside shoulder, waits till that swipe comes in, he'll pull it back, and then boom, he's right inside your chest with both hands. So pretty good with his hands in that phase. Really a tough guy to go through with power. So just a lot to like. Very likely going to be a high-end starter. Hard to kind of picture where things could go wrong, where he's not a really good player. He's just 21 years old, and there's a lot to like there. But maybe some of that length could reduce him from being, an all-pro type of guy. But that's pretty nitpicky, and I'm not going to say he doesn't have that potential in there either.
Yeah, so I love everything you said about Membou. This is my tackle one. I remember first hearing about Membou like the late October, early November area, and then One night I decided I was going to throw the tape on, and I like to get a general idea of where guys are, like just have an expectation. Okay, like where's consensus on this guy? And I saw at the time it was like early to mid third round, and I watched the tape, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I tweeted back in December that, hey, this is a really, really good player, and I love everything about his game. I think there is advanced hand usage beyond his years, and I think with any concerns with the length or with the lack of, the 35-inch arms or the 34-plus-inch arms, and that he's, only 6'4", and that he's not 6'5 plus, I think it alleviates it with how smart he is as a player for how young he is as a player, and the fact that he can guard those inside counters, or that he'll have a snatch or have a snatch trap, and he'll just throw guys down whenever he just flashes a quick hand, pulls it back, and then throws them down to the turf. His testing was elite by every definition. He put up 30 plus reps on the bench. He ran a sub 540, and not that you're going to draft an O lineman in the first round strictly because of that, but it was nice to see more boxes than you thought were going to get checked. In fact, checked with Mbow, and the fact that he also dominated the SEC last year as a 20-year-old going up against guys that will probably also be called on round one of the 2025 draft. So to me, this is my offensive tackle one. I absolutely love his game, and I would be surprised if he's not at least a one-time Pro Bowler based on the combination of his athleticism, his advanced hand usage for how young he is, and with the runway for him to get better, because this isn't a limited athlete that you're hoping can take the next level. This is a guy that has elite athleticism, even for NFL standards, and he's already a very good player that was shown on tape at 20 years old.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I love the potential to make an all-pro shout in there, because I was just checking my notes here and hearing you talk about the hand placement being so good with him. Some of my downside notes on him are very like footwork related stuff that's very like coachable for a young player. Like I wrote down footwork as a reach blocker for wide zone and on pulls needs to be cleaned up. There was times where he wasn't able to fully tap into his athleticism when they would get him on the move. It's in there, but just, teaching him the proper kind of bucket step technique to really get on the move, to tap into that athleticism. And then I did write down that he did have losses in his anchor when trying to recover, when he would let guys into his chest because he's got shorter arms at times. I felt like he could have got to that hop set re-anchoring technique much quicker. So very coachable stuff. A couple of things there if he can work on. You could be talking definitely all pro type of upside. And he does have the highest upside grade out of any of these players in my tackle group here. So let's go to my number 3. Offensive tackle, again, still within that first tier. All these guys have true first round grades, top 20. I'm comfortable with any of these guys. And realistically, Membou would be, if my job's on the line, I understand why Membou is kind of the top 10 pick favorite there for sure, because of the injury. But my number 3 tackle is going to be Will Campbell. This is where I have the man that's been on the draft radar for a long, long time. If you checked any way too early mock draft back, last summer, you would have seen Will Campbell's name in the top 3 or 4. And sounds like he still might go that high. The Patriots seem really keyed in on him. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on him, because I didn't like him as much at tackle as I wanted to. The more and more I watched him, there's been so many of these guys, whether it was Skoronski, who never got a chance at tackle in the league, or especially like Rashawn Slater, Zach Tom, these guys that have been criticized for arm length, that I watched their tape and it didn't really impact their game so much on tape. I actually did think it impacted Will Campbell a good bit, especially going against some of those bigger NFL caliber SEC rushers. He's not able to set the terms of engagement by hitting guys first. He really has to be a reactive tackle. And he's about as damn good as you could possibly ask for a guy that is basically always going to have to be reacting instead of being on the attack. Now, sometimes he can counter that by doing those quick sets and really jumping out of his stance and getting on guys quickly. That's great. You can't do that every single set against NFL linemen, because they'll do a push, pull, swim. These great guys will recognize that if you're doing it every single snap and get past you, as good as you might be at it. But that's one way he neutralizes it. But yeah, man, like he would go backwards against the bull rush quite a bit. I felt like he lacked some of the length to always cut off inside counters. He would recognize it, but couldn't quite get his hands where he needed to be. If guys would go to like an inside rip move, he just couldn't quite out leverage them. And a part of that too is he plays with really high pad level, which, you know, a lot of these guys with shorter arms are going to be kind of in that lunging, kind of angling posture to kind of compensate for the lack of length. He wants to play with your typical textbook technique where he's going to sit back in the chair and get ready to strike with, you know, upright posture. Well, if you got shorter arms, it's a lot harder to do that. So he gets beat doing that quite a bit. So the pass blocking with him just at tackle, I thought was just okay, frankly, despite the fact that his hand usage is elite. He mixes things up. He was effective. I think he can play tackle in the NFL. I got a first round grade on him for a reason, right? But I definitely like him better with that lack of length, which is with his latch and mirror potential, with his athleticism as a blocker on the inside. I like his upside much better, making that switch into a guard or tackle spot, a guard or center spot. So we'll see what direction a team wants to go with him. But definitely it was tough because I didn't want to just lock him in as a guard. Right. It's why he's in my tackle rankings. But if I'm ranking him as a tackle, I do like the other guys better. So that's kind of where I came down on him. What'd you think?
I agree with everything you're saying, except I personally he's my OG1. I respect that he's your OT3, but I have a hard time thinking that if Will Campbell, and I don't think this is a complicated thought process by any means. I'm not like reinventing the wheel here, but for how much he struggled against both South Carolina and A&M against future NFL rushers, guys that he's going to be going up against every Sunday. You know, he's not going to be playing small schools on Sundays, right? When he went up against the Kyle Kennards and the Dylan Stewarts and the Nick Scortons and the Shamar Stewarts, it wasn't good.
Yeah.
Or it wasn't
it was when Kyle Kennard really was working him when I started to get worried.
I mean, he allowed 9 pressures in those 2 games alone, and that's not good when those are guys you're going to be going up against every single Sunday. And obviously, there's going to be a lot better players than just those couple of guys that we mentioned at the NFL level, rather than those guys at 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. The only reason I mentioned 18 was because of Dylan Stewart. But I think that Will Campbell is, by every definition, a guard at the NFL level, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think there's kind of a negative stigma sometimes of like, well, we'll just kick him inside and because he can't play, you know, tackle. I think he would be, from a trajectories career standpoint, not necessarily a comparison, but how Joe Thuney kicked out this year, where if you need him to kick out, you can. I would personally prefer him at offensive guard. I think that is a Pro Bowl floor guard player, because everything you mentioned, he is a technician he's a technician as a player. There are very few weaknesses in Will Campbell's game that are not athletic. He does everything right from a technician standpoint and from doing things the right way from the ground up, but he can't help that. I mean, well, except from the high pad level, that could of course be coached. But from everything that is pretty much in his control, he does a good job of. He's just not 34 plus inch arms. He's not, Joe Alt size to be able to play the way he does. So because of all of this, I would rather see him kick inside, and whichever team drafts him, I think it would be New England at this point. I think they would have a Pro Bowl level guard at number 4 overall or wherever he goes in the first round.
Yeah. The upside's definitely there. But with the high stance and the pad level, it is going to be a transition period. I don't think it's going to be, plug and play and he's going to be kicking ass right away. I have in my notes his 77 3/8 inch wingspan is the shortest recorded for an offensive tackle in the 21st century. So that explains why you feel his lack of length hurt him even more than some of those other shorter length tackles in the past, because it's not just the length, it's narrow shoulders and a shorter wingspan as well.
T-Rex arms.
Yeah. Hope maybe he can go against Trey Hendrickson every week and those guys can just duke it out. All right, so I have one more player in my first tier here of all first round grades, someone that I'm less gung-ho about keeping in this top tier, but you wanted to start with this player, Kelvin Banks out of Texas. So I'm going to let you start and go off on Kelvin Banks, and then I will react to what you said.
Yeah, so let me kind of preface this with here. I love Kelvin Banks. He's my OT3. Now, just because I love him doesn't mean I'm way high on him. He's my OT3 behind Mbow and Simmons. But look, I like Kelvin Banks for several reasons. I think he passes not only the eye test, but also, I mean, he passed the athletic test for what I'd be looking for in an offensive tackle at during his pre-draft testing. I think he displays an advanced usage of just his overall mechanics within the pass rush, where there's times, he jumps out to the 45-degree set. He can counter speed moves. He can get out to prevent the speed moves. He can prevent the inside counters. There are a couple of times where you mentioned earlier about kind of sitting on a chair where he does that, but there was one rep specifically against Michael Williams that ultimately I do think this is coachable, where Michael kind of like slow stepped him, and then he kind of just absolutely stabbed him and got him in the chest. And Kelvin, that was one of the true reps that I saw Kelvin lose all year to power. But like where I stand on that is guys are going to get beat, and one rep specifically against another first round rusher does not deter me from the other 300 reps that I saw where he was good and that he looked like a genuinely good football player and a future first round pick, and what should be a first round pick. Kelvin is also just 21 years old. He just turned 21 in March. Now I think there will be some complaints due to him not necessarily being an elite athlete, but I think he definitely passes all of the thresholds in terms of what he needs to be an offensive tackle. And I think at times, because this class doesn't have the players that it did last year, that people kind of dismiss who he is as a player. But the only sack that he allowed in all of 2024, both regular and postseason, was against Jalen Walker, or it was against Georgia, rather. I think it was Jalen Walker. And it was on a play where Quinn Ewers, we've discussed this at length before, but it was a play where Quinn Ewers, who was not going to go in the first couple of rounds for a reason, dropped back about 12 yards. Kelvin Banks did everything right. He stayed with his guy going outside, and Quinn just kept dropping back. And if you go far enough outside, and your quarterback keeps dropping back, eventually you are going to be able to round the edge. He trips Quinn Ewers, it's like he almost pulled his shoelace as Quinn Ewers was stepping up in the pocket. Kelvin looks up, sees his quarterback goes down, throws his hands in the air because he knows that shouldn't have been a sack allowed, and he knows that's also going on him, despite him doing everything right. Bottom line, in one sentence: good athlete, good football player. Do not overthink it. He allowed a single sack last year on over, let me get the exact number, on over 500 pass blocking snaps for a reason. And I think he is a great player, and that's the bottom line. I love his game, and yeah, I love Kelvin Banks.
Allowing just one sack with Quinn Ewers as your quarterback is very impressive, because it's not just the deep drops, which he does, but he also just bails out of clean pockets and will just walk into sacks too. So that's definitely impressive. I did 3 full games on him, and I keep kind of keeping tabs on him because I keep revisiting the Texas offense for all these different pro players they have, or they're going against someone else I'm watching. And it's just he just continues to check boxes. Just super, super solid. Excuse me. I don't think he plays as athletic as even his testing indicated. And it's not like his testing was incredible. 5'1", 640. The 179 10-yard is below average, but he did jump 32 inches. 104-inch broad jump is okay. Did have the 4.66 shuttle, which is pretty damn good. I don't see him ever being a great tackle. I think his upside at tackle is, it's hard to say the lowest out of the guys we've talked about just because of everything we said about Campbell. But, I do think going against high-end athletes, he just doesn't quite have the range and ability to recover against some of these guys that he's going to face at the next level. And as a run blocker too, he was pretty good. He's steady, he keeps his hands in, he's got good technique, but I didn't feel like he was an imposing or tenacious blocker at all times. I also had a lot of times where he would climb to the second level and just the targeting system was off, didn't always know who to get. So there were definitely some knocks on him, but yeah, the pass protection's very, very steady. There's a little bit of reminiscent of when I was watching Charles Cross coming out, where it's just the technique every single play is just consistent. So I do like him, but he's kind of in this bridge between our next tier here for me as more of a You know, if any of those other guys went in the top 12 picks, for example, I would say, yeah, franchise tackle, or, Will Campbell, potential all-pro guard like we talked about. Kelvin Banks, it's more like, yeah, you're getting a starting lineman. Is it going to return the upside compared to some of the other guys available on the board at that point? That's where I would maybe start to push back a little bit. But I did keep him as a true first-round grade and in my first tier. Would that be the cutoff of the tier for you, or do you have anybody else in a first tier for you? Because I know I asked you to put together some tiers for these guys.
I actually did not specify. I have Kelvin Banks in a tier of his own. So I have Mbow, Campbell, Mbow, Simmons, and Campbell all in the same tier. And I was kind of including like a guard within the first tier just because of Campbell. I think he's like I said, he's a great guard prospect. And then I have Kelvin Banks in tier 2 along the offensive line by himself. And then other players we shall soon discuss.
Wait, you lost me there. You said Kelvin Banks in tier 2 by himself?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So you had Membou,
the first three. Yep, Mbow, Simmons, and then Campbell.
Okay, sorry. Yep. I probably just had a brain fart there. Anyway, let's go to my next tier. So these are top 50 graded players for me, and very likely starters in the league, but definitely have maybe a little bit longer to go in terms of whether it's physical development or technical development before I'm comfortable with them on the field day one. So I have Josh Conerly as my 5th tackle. To me, he's a pretty simple evaluation, extremely athletic tackle, great feet, gets a ton of range, has really good feet to cut off inside moves as well. He's a true tackle. I don't think he's a guy that has the play strength that I really want to kick inside and mess around with that. But definitely someone with the athleticism, with the range. The length is just okay, right? Yeah, 33 3/4 inches is the best out of any of these guys we've talked about so far. That's still below average. It's a weird thing about this draft is all these top guys have below average arm length, but that's still pretty solid. So for him, it's just I need to see him continue to bulk up. He reminds me of like a little bit of a better version of like Roger Rosengarten last year, who I was unfortunately too low on, and he was really good, technically sound guy that just came into the league and held up quite well in year 1. But same thing applies. I want to see him add functional play strength, which is it's fun to sit here and say that, but he is 6'4.5", 311 pounds. That's a pretty filled out frame for the most part. So it's never a guarantee that he's going to be able to add that play strength. Andre Dillard comes to mind out of, he was Oregon, right? Former first round pick.
Washington State.
He was he Washington State?
Yep. 2019. Time flies.
Man, yeah, I don't know why I was thinking Oregon there, but he definitely comes to mind where that was the same thing. It was like, he's got to add play strength. He never really did. So there's kind of shades of that with him on a low end. And I don't necessarily write down comps for all my offensive linemen, but got to improve the anchor, and just not a huge people mover in the run game either, but very technically sound and gives him a high floor in that way. And if he can bulk up, could be more of a franchise left tackle type. How'd you see him?
Pretty much the same way. I like Conerly for what he is, and I've kind of prefaced this before, that if I like a player for what he is, and I preface it with that, generally speaking, they're not a first round, they're not a top 20, they're not a great. They can be good, but then they can be, good in some areas. But Conerly, like you mentioned, the big thing that I worry about is the anchor, and I worry about if you have a guy that has really heavy hands rushing from maybe a 5 tech that, he's going to bull Conerly back into the pocket every time. And I think the Rosengarten comparison is really good. But I do worry about Conerly's anchor. But little fun fact, I'm not sure if you know this, but he was a running back at one point in his life. And I think that shows up on tape in the fact of just how athletic he is as a tackle. But athleticism at the tackle position is good, but it's not necessarily everything. And if I could trade some of the athleticism for more strength in this, and I could have a trade-off here, I would rather do that with Conerly. If I could, take a little bit off of what he is, and like I said, just reproportion, I would prefer that. I really think in some areas you're going to have to chip him immediately. Like if you are playing a heavy-handed rusher every Sunday, and you have those, 8 to 10 true pass set, hey, it's 3rd and 9, we have to have this, we have to have enough time. I don't trust Josh Conerly one-on-one on an island with the elite pass rushers in the NFL,
Yeah.
or at least the heavy-handed guys that can win with power regularly. So pretty much the same way. Like I said, second round grade, good prospect, not great, good prospect, and I like what he brings to the table. Just there's a few glaring weaknesses with him.
Yeah. There's a reason I really like him to the Eagles at the end of the first round, because that's a situation. I mean, Lane Johnson's 35 years old, right? But who knows how long he's going to play. But let's say it's 2 years. Let Conerly just hit the weight room for 2 years and learn from Lane Johnson and just replace him. Like, that could be just a dream fit. But yeah, definitely a guy that you might have some struggles early on if you want to throw him out there.
Can I add one more thing real quick?
Yeah.
Just with Conerly. I thought it was evident in the Ohio State playoff game. I'll just leave it. Like, I thought there were a couple bad reps in particular where I was like, okay, if this is against JT, what's it going to be at the next level? Yeah. And that's what kind of, he had a good year, but the one game, if it was that bad against the good competition, what is it going to be when we go to an even more difficult level of competition? So that was the big thing. I like him though. I like him, but.
And then seeing Mike Green just like completely embarrass him.
We saw it live.
Senior Bowl.
We saw it live.
That was he got posterized, that's for sure. He got memed. But then I have one other player in this small second tier here, and that is Aireontae Ersery. Go Gophers. But I liked him. I was a little worried because he had some early buzz, and then a lot of, he's very much like kind of fallen off the sort of top 40 discussion based on a lot of what I've been hearing, but finally got to him like 2 days ago, and that's kind of where I came in on him. Was like a early second round guy that I actually think is more ready than Conerly to step in right away, just because I think the play strength isn't going to be as much of a issue for him. But there's definitely some problems there. Like, I think he's tough because he just feels a little bit uncoordinated at times, where I do think he's athletic. Let me start with that. Like, he's at 6'6", 330 pounds. Like, he can explode into his kick slides. I think there's really good moments where he puts it all together and he's able to shuffle and cut off inside moves. And like, kind of like you were talking about with Conerly, if you could trade some of the athleticism for size, he's kind of that vision a little bit more in terms of the build. So I really like that about him. I think his body is ready to step into the league right now. But he just doesn't always keep his feet moving to stay square, whether it's as a pass blocker or as a run blocker. And it just makes him really inconsistent. And then you pair that with the fact that he is another one of these guys that has shorter arms, 6'6", just over 33-inch arms. He doesn't have that length to kind of compensate if he's a little bit out of position because of his feet. So fifth-year player, can that get improved? That's up to the offensive line coaches of the NFL, but that's kind of his issue, is that he's a good player. He's ready to go. I think he's a better pass protector than I expected to see, kind of based on the profile and the fact that a lot of people have kind of stopped talking about him. But it's not to say he doesn't lose. And the last thing I'll say on him is, even though he's 330 pounds, he does let edge rushers hit him in the chest and knock him back, and he lacks some of that recovery, composed quickness to reset and regather. So yeah, he was an up and down player, but I did still like what I saw, and I've got him as a top 50 grade in this draft and a potential franchise tackle. How did you see him?
Very similarly, though. There's going to be a couple of guys that we have coming up. I honestly don't think it would be a bad idea to kick him inside to guard. I know Ersery tested really well. It was like 75th percentile or above in both the 10-yard split and the 40. Now, having said that, I don't think that player showed up, especially in the pass pro game. Now, there were times where he would make really athletic plays in the run game, and he would cut backside guys off, and he would have these nice blocks, these almost highlight reel blocks in the run game, and it was nice to see. But for every splash play, if you will, that he'd have, as in the run game, there were multiple plays where he was not getting posterized, but he would just they'd be making like threes in his eye, if you will. It was just like, dude, like it's just like Aireontae, the player that you are some plays, I want that more consistent. And it was frustrating. And my whole thing with him is I don't think the athleticism that we saw in Indy is the player he is or will be on Sundays. And because of
Mhm.
that, I think the foot, I think there's a little heavy feet. I think they can stuck in the mud sometimes. And now, if he gets his hands on you, that's a different story, but that's kind of an if in itself because of how inconsistent he can be at times. And the fact that he's already 23, this isn't a 20 going on 21-year-old guy. I question how much of a ceiling there is with Ersery, but I like him a
Mhm.
lot. I think right now he's a developmental guy. I would personally be comfortable, especially in this class, taking him in the top 50. And I think there's a vision where he would spot start, 4, 5, 6 games this year, and I think he would hold his own. But
Yeah.
the limitations are there, and just the biggest thing that especially applies to Ersery for me, based on the player that I saw on tape, was the underwear Olympics are not always true to the tape, and I think that's
Mhm.
especially true with him.
Yeah, especially like the speed at 5. He ran almost in the 4s, 5:01. That certainly doesn't show. And for what it's worth, you said he was a little heavy-footed. He did have a lower shuttle of 4.82, which is not great.
That's good. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Disregard. I was thinking different drill. Sorry.
You're good. So is that your tier 2, or your next tier, or do you have anybody else?
I have Ersery a little lower. I kind of chunked my O line together. I had just all in tiers. So I had the first 4 that we discussed in the top 2 tiers. I had Conerly in tier 3 along with an interior offensive lineman, and then I had Ersery in tier 4 along with a couple of other interior offensive linemen.
Okay, so you don't have any other offensive tackles in that tier with Ersery. Okay.
No, I have a couple. Yep.
Okay. So my next tier here, tier 3, are more mid day 2 options. So again, that last tier was more like top 50, late first, early second on Conerly, and top 50 on Ersery. But yeah, mid day 2 options who are hopeful starters in the league. My number 7 offensive tackle here is Charles Grant out of William and Mary. I had to do a double take there, make sure I wasn't getting his school wrong, playing at that level of competition. But he's got the best arm length out of anybody we've talked about so far, 34 3/4 inches. Really a good athlete. He's your classic bet on the guy with the wrestling background, which has just been like a slam dunk decision. And I got burnt on that last year. I kind of overthought it with Zach Frazier for the Steelers. I had him as more of a 3rd, 4th round guy. He goes in the 2nd. He was awesome out the gate. And it was just a reminder, like, man, when you have that core power and the flexibility, like, that really does matter. And when he gets his hands on guys at his level of competition, it's like, yeah, he's just going to control them and take them for a ride. So it's hard to take too much out of his tape. I watched one game just to kind of see what it might look like. Definitely technique wise, like, there's still stuff with, let's see, what did I write down technique wise here just to recall? Anchoring, having to recover, like, because he's hardly ever losing at that level. It's like the one time a guy got into his chest and pushed him back, he just kind of did this instead of re-anchoring. It's like, okay, so he's gonna go through an adjustment period making that jump. The hope is he learns by losing basically against NFL linemen, and then looking at it and say, all right, how did I lose? I lost giving up my chest, didn't move my feet. And then you make that adjustment. Like, it's going to be a transition for him, but has the size, good athlete, maybe not like an exceptional athlete, but just kind of understands the root of how to block players with that wrestling background. And I had him as a, late 2nd, early 3rd round type of flyer. Where'd you have Charles Grant?
Right around the same area. I'm early to mid 3 with Charles. Charles is in that next tier, that tier 5 for me of offensive linemen. You mentioned earlier about somebody going to Philadelphia and basically going to Jeff Stoutland University. This is my guy that if I could pick one in this class to go to Jeff Stoutland University and eventually be that Lane Johnson replacement, it would be Charles Grant. I would love to see them put him kind of on a bulking program over the next couple of years. Have him drink those protein shakes at night, eat those PB&J sandwiches, and get him up to 320, and basically let a future Hall of Famer, Lane Johnson, take him under his wing. I think Lane is a very selfless player. And I think Lane would, I don't want to say welcome that, but I think Lane would be fine with that. Like, yeah, man, like, here's what you got to do. And here, listen to Stout, and, give all the football guy cliche things. But look, his anchor right now is my biggest concern. And if you're going from William and Mary to the NFL level, I mean, even if you are a elite prospect, I feel like there's going to be a transition period no matter what, just going from that competition level. And that's going to be my biggest thing. I would not want him to play much as a rookie unless it would be like sixth offensive lineman, 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, those types of situations. Like, and this also applies to another player I think we're going to discuss in a little bit. But the anchor is what concerns me. Just that's there's one sentence thing. The anchor concerns me, but the potential is there. And I would love for the Eagles to draft him.
Yeah, very well said. The interesting thing about him is he came in out of high school. He had hardly played. That's why he was under recruited. He came in at 240 pounds coming into the league. So he's been on that weight gain trajectory. So yeah, he's got a little bit more frame to fill out, get him up to 320 from 310 where he's at right now. Definitely could be in business. So sticking in the same tier, I have Anthony Belton next as my number 8 tackle. This is someone that you said you wanted to take here. So what'd you see in Anthony Belton?
All right, let me be real dramatic here. Look, I love Anthony Belton. I'm going to talk like Baldy just because of how much I love Anthony Belton. There's not many players that I'm like day 2.5, borderline day 3, where I'm willing to swing the bat for, but Anthony Belton is certainly one of them. And I saw you tweet out a clip of him today, just putting some guy from Tennessee on his rear end. I'm not sure if it was James Pierce, but look, that's the type of stuff that you see from Anthony Belton. If you can describe him in one word, without a doubt, the word is power or beef. You get the point. He is just enormous, and his play strength is really, really good. Now, because he is 6'6", 340, and as big as he is, naturally he's a little heavy in the pants. He's a little heavy footed. He's lead feet, if you will, and that is the one concern. Well, that is the major concern I have with Anthony Belton, is that if we have any, and I'm not even saying a good 250-pound edge rusher, but if we have a sub 250-pound edge rusher, they can get around him pretty easily, in fact.
Yeah.
So I told you pre-recording, did not tell him what the bold take was. My bold take for Anthony Belton my hot take is I would love for him to kick inside because of the concerns with the foot speed. I don't think he has the foot speed to play offensive tackle, snap after snap, game after game, because I think that will eventually catch up to him. And I don't want to get into the game of having guys drop 15 pounds and be a completely different player. So my hot take is I really don't think there is that much of a difference between Anthony Belton, and this is a projection here, if he transitions to guard, between Anthony Belton and Tyler Booker. I am a huge Anthony Belton guy. I will go to bat for him every time. And if you can get him in a gap scheme, you can pound the rock up the middle, run behind 74. Good things are going to happen. Kick him inside. Don't play with fire. Do not have him out on an edge with the speed rusher and find out when your quarterback gets sacked. Just kick him inside and let him go to war, if you will.
I thought you were going to get really hot there and say it's not a difference between him and Will Campbell, which would have been real spicy. Okay. Yeah, totally agree about the power. The clip I shared on Twitter, I'll try to include it here when I go back to edit this video, but it's just insane. The drive off the ball, the displacement when he helps. That's another reason I love him as a guard, is like when he's unoccupied and he's going in to help, his center or his tackle or, whoever it might be as a guard in pass pro, he will just end the rep and just annihilate the guy and knock him back to the sideline. Like, it is elite play strength, power. A couple issues though. He actually did lose to power because of just kind of letting guys into his chest, and he has the length to protect against that, but he has to do that better. He's 24 years old, going on 25. When the Super Bowl's over, he will be 25 years old, so he's an older prospect. And this was something that I picked up from, shout out Dane Brugler, but from The Beast. He has all these little interesting tidbits. I had already written down that he was an undisciplined player, was penalized 8 times in each of his 3 seasons, because I was checking that because there was a lot of run block reps where He didn't gain great positioning because of that lack of athleticism and just wouldn't let guys go. So I wanted to see how many times he was penalized. I wish PFF would tell us which were holding calls and false starts and all that stuff, because that's very useful information. But can only assume 8 penalties in each of the last 3 seasons. Many of those were going to be holding calls. But the Dane Brugler fact was he was ejected from the Clemson game for spitting on a player. So you're talking about a guy that's been in college football for 6 years, a lot of penalties, ejected for spitting on a player, not getting maybe some of the buzz that he should at his size. I do wonder if maybe there's some, this is all purely speculation, but maybe some kind of character development questions there. I don't know, but I do have a 3rd round grade on him. Again, have him in this category. Love the guard projection. The only pushback I would have against you, just to kind of tease the Tyler Booker stuff a little bit, is Tyler Booker is way more coordinated as an athlete. I think even if he doesn't have the athletic traits, I think whatever he does have, he's much more coordinated. So I would say that on top of that. But yeah, excited to see Belton in the league. A lot of like Orlando Brown to his game. And I love the guard transition too. Could see kind of a Micaiah Becton-esque guard season from him too. And then I have one more guy in this 3rd tier of hopeful starters, and that's Ozzie Trapilo out of Boston College. Liked him way more than I was expecting because he has the profile that just terrifies the crap out of me. He's 6'8" with almost 33-inch arms, 33.25-inch arms. So trying to win leverage when you're tall and have short arms is a nightmare. And I've seen so many of these guys that are just constantly getting thrown around, don't have the balance, can't anchor. Wasn't the case with Ozzie Trapilo. He understands that he's built in this awkward size, but he's crafted his game really well. He kind of angles his body in a way that he's able to protect his chest, get the most out of his length by kind of angling himself forward, but he still stays balanced in his second half, in his lower half, which is not easy to do. But because he's able to do that in both phases as a run blocker and when he's getting into his pass sets, his tape was just really good. He just didn't lose a lot. He's not the most incredible athlete, but I thought his play strength was really good. I thought he just had pretty good feet, really good, untraditional technique, but it was consistent technique for how he wins. And I see a guy that, if nothing else, as a backup tackle should be like ready to go right away, but really don't have any good reasons why he couldn't prove to be a starter as like a 3rd round pick either. So really was pleasantly surprised by Trapilo.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. The biggest thing is once you get into this day 2, day 3, I'm looking at traits with Trapilo, and I think that you summed it up perfectly. The one thing that concerns me is just can he transition to the NFL with the shorter arms and winning the same way that he was at Boston College. That's my main concern with him. But I think when you are, getting day 2, day 3, and you have like those Matt Goncalves of the world, like from last year from Pitt, if you can draft somebody like that, and if he can play out your rookie contract and spot start if need be at either tackle, which I think Ozzie could play at either tackle. I don't think he would be a one-trick pony. That would be ultimately the ideal situation for him.
Yeah, totally. Crazy thing is he played every position for Boston College at some point other than center. I didn't go back to watch those snaps at guard, but probably not where I'm putting him at 6'8". I feel like I might have oversold. Like he did have those reps where he struggled to win positioning and leverage and kind of just got moved around a little bit. But I don't want to back off what I said either. So that's the end of my tier 3. And then I'm going to kind of just speed round a couple names here for my 4th tier. Really not going to get into it, but I know you guys were going to be curious where I rank some of these guys. And then we'll switch over to guards here. But my 4th tier for offensive tackles has 4 names in it, and these are true traits-based developmental guys that I do not want to see playing in year 1. So my number 10 here is Cam Williams out of Texas. Really surprised he declared at 21 years old. But has all the length, the size at 6'5", 325 pounds, 11.5-inch hands. he's just got to learn how to use his feet and not stink on the football field. Frankly, was really surprised he did not go back to Texas. But then I've got Emory Jones out of LSU, probably a guard, but he does have the length. And I did think he exploded into his kick slides pretty well. He just really had stiff, slow feet to recover and react. So probably more of a guard at 6'5", 315, but I want to give him a punter's chance at tackle. And then I have Jalen Rivers out of Miami. Had a hard time really coming up with a strong opinion on him because he's got crazy size and length. The tape was just kind of like inconsistent. Some reps he would destroy guys. Some reps was like came in kind of soft. And just gotta find a way to get more stability out of his game. So I had 4th to 5th round grades on all of those guys. And then I threw in Carson Vinson as a 5th round grade 2 out of Alabama A&M. Could keep this one short. I didn't even have tape on him, but I was reading up on him and saw some of his drills at the combine. He had, I think it was the fastest speed in pass sets at the pass set drills at the combine. So kind of a 6'7" length traits-based prospect on the NFL's radar. So just a quick shout out for those as your kind of early day 3, top developmental hopeful, 2-3 year down the road starter types. But let's go ahead and go to the interior of the offensive line. Less names to discuss here, but still a very fun group. And some of these guys, you might be wondering, these guys were tackles in college. Why weren't you talking about them on the interior of the offensive line? It sounds like those players, you're in agreement with who I'm kicking into the interior here. We can get into that. But my first tier of interior offensive linemen is 2 players. And these guys are kind of back end of the first round players for me. Gray Zabel is my number 1 interior offensive lineman out of North Dakota State. I understand he played at North Dakota State, and that scares some people off. Dude, he has incredible athleticism to translate, and I don't put this lightly. I've been going to the Senior Bowl. Let's see, I've been to the Senior Bowl 5 out of the last 6 years. I think he had the best week I've ever seen from a player at the Senior Bowl. The only other option there, athletic, athletic, small school offensive lineman Quinn Miners, who made his first team All-Pro this year, by the way. So not scared of the level of competition. Quick feet, plenty of play strength. That's what really surprised me is he was listed a little bit lighter. But let's see, what is he up to now? He's up to 312 pounds now, but he was listed closer to 300 at North Dakota State. But he can anchor. I believe that. He can move guys in the run game. He's going to be brilliant for any sort of wide zone blocking schemes. But just really checks the box, too, in terms of that. I always look for guys with that dickhead mentality where he wants to finish blocks, and he looks like he enjoys blocking. That was Gray Zabel to me. So I've got a 1st to a 2nd round grade on him anywhere after the 16th pick. Even Miami at 13, I'd be like, yeah, in this draft class, players 10 through 30 are all about the same anyway. So why not? How'd you see Gray Zabel?
I saw him very similar. To give him a landing spot, I like the idea of Seattle at 18. But my biggest thing with Gray Zabel, and this applies to a lot of small school offensive linemen, is you want to see that dog mentality, if you will, that like, hey, like I want to plant you into the turf, and you never question that with Gray Zabel at all. Seattle needs interior offensive line help in the absolute worst way, and I would love for Seattle to draft Gray Zabel to play next to Charles Cross. That would be ideal. Now, I know some people want to kick him inside to center. Look, you are getting a good interior offensive lineman with Gray Zabel, and that's the biggest thing is he is a floor raiser for whatever team that he goes to, and he's kind of in my tier of really good football player. Do not overthink him and just kind of leave it at that. And like you said, he had a better anchor than I thought for being how light he was. I thought we were going to get a little bit of a Charles Grant type athlete or type offensive lineman where, even with the lesser competition that, we may have a guy with a little bit, a little bit less strong of an anchor, but I thought he was fine. And then, like you said, he had a great week down in Mobile, and I think his game is or I think the trajectory rather, is very similar to another Bison offensive lineman, and that's Cody Mock of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So absolutely love Gray Zabel. And the one sentence summary: good football player. Don't overthink it. Floor raiser.
Yeah, I will say Mock did not have a good week at the Senior Bowl, and I thought he got destroyed in his anchor. So I think Zabel is even coming into the league much more ready than Mock, personally. But let's go to my number 2, interior offensive lineman. Inside tier 1, I'm still going to give Tyler Booker some love here, man. I think he's getting a little bit too much hate these days. I still think he's a hell of a football player. Now, there's a huge caveat with him. He has to go to a head-up blocking scheme. And we know 2/3 of the league right now are like Shanahan wide zone blocking systems. So I do understand why he's getting pushed down in a lot of fans' minds, but I think that's getting twisted with what he means for a team like Detroit or Philadelphia or Baltimore, all teams conveniently picking at the end of the first round. There are systems where Tyler Booker could be one of the best offensive linemen for you out of this draft class. He is, no, not the most incredible athlete, though his shuttle time was 4.65. He got that down at his pro day, and that's a pretty good number for a guy that you're saying can't really move. And I think that shows in the sense that he has enough foot speed to latch and mirror and pass protect on the inside. But what I love the most about him, well, I guess there's 2 things. Number one, I genuinely think he has some of the best blocker awareness that I've ever seen from a lineman. This is a trait that I grade for all these players, and I'm just going to read my description of what blocker awareness is on my draft board. The blocker's awareness as it relates to his targeting system to find players at the second level, in blitz pickup, not letting defenders cross his face in the run game, not blowing assignments, etc. There's just something you need to see from an offensive lineman, and you can tell it as you go through the tape. Like, some guys they second guess themselves, they blow assignments, they don't see the blitz come through, or they climb to the second level and they don't really know who they're supposed to pick up. Not Tyler Booker. He has a just wonderful sense of what he's supposed to do out there, and it allows him to play fast. Unlike, someone I was just hinting at, like Jalen Rivers out of Miami. Much better athlete theoretically, but just doesn't play up to that speed. So I loved that about him. And that's what you hear from these, the reports come out of the combine is like literally the best interview we've ever seen from an offensive lineman. Like, he's the Will Anderson of the offensive line. Like, they love him in these interviews. And I think that shows. I believe he was a captain as a sophomore. Did I put that in my notes? Does that sound right to you?
I could see it. I mean, I could see it. Like, he's that checks out. I would say that checks out with him.
Team captain at 20 years old, and he graduated in 3 years at Alabama. So this dude is he is built differently in terms of work ethic and character. But the other thing I like about him on the football field, he's 6'4", 320 pounds, but he's got really good arm length for a guard, 34.5-inch arms and 11-inch hands. So like he's not too tall. Yeah, pop, and just vice grips for hands. So he's got easy access to you in terms of leverage because he's not super tall, but he's got long arms and he's accurate with his hands and just freaking woolly mammoth grips, man. So he's super sticky as a blocker, helps him in both phases. No, you can't pull block with him too much. You can't, if you need him to open up and seal off the opposite B gap and run traditional power, I think he can do that a little bit. But for the most part, you don't want to run a lot of wide zone with him. He's going to be a bottleneck effect for you and that type of thing. But man, if you're a head up blocking scheme, even like Cincinnati at 17, they're a very north and south run game. I think the floor is some of the best of any player in this draft. So I did want to give Tyler Booker some love. How do you feel about him?
So I want to start the Booker part, going back to what I said about Anthony Belton. It's more of that I'm a fan of Anthony Belton rather than anti-Tyler Booker. Now, I also did want to clarify that I do have Tyler Booker a tier above Anthony Belton. I did just want to preface that. But I agree with everything you said. The biggest thing with Tyler Booker for me that I also go back to Gray Zabel is he's a floor raiser within the interior offensive line. And the biggest thing that I'm concerned with Tyler Booker, and I would hope that a team would not make this mistake because it would be a genuinely idiotic mistake, is if you are a wide zone team, do not draft him. Not even just don't even have him on your board, because he's going to be gone by the time that it would be reasonable. And that's honestly one of my biggest concerns with him, and ultimately other players that I've been lower on in other years, where I worry that teams are not going to use players the right way. But there, like you said, there is a lot to like with Tyler Booker. When you think of phone booth guard, just good luck. You know, you are in this space right here. Good luck getting around him. I mean, genuinely good luck getting around him. He is just, his anchor is A++. I mean, it is NFL. It is more than NFL ready. He is 21 years old, and I think that's another just extreme positive, is because, you know, over the past couple of years, due to the ramifications of COVID, we've had 24, 25-year-old prospects pretty regularly. But for Tyler Booker to be as good of a player as he is at just 21 years old, that is an extreme. I mean, that's just an extreme positive moving forward, because, you know, you have a high floor of a guy already at 21 that should play, you know, 26, 27, 20, that should play for a long time. And I like that you mentioned Cincinnati. I like that you mentioned Baltimore, especially Baltimore, because they quietly have a couple of question marks along their offensive line. And Cincinnati, whether they go defense, whether they give Joe Burrow some protection, I would be fine with either. But the biggest thing with Tyler Booker for me is he is a very good football player. He is a floor raiser. The only thing that I would go back to why I'm high on Anthony Belton then rather than anti Tyler Booker is it's more of the ceiling is what concerns me, is because I don't think he's going to be this all-world player because of the limitations within his game. Now, that doesn't mean he's a bad player. It's just that he's, you know, you're not going to be able to do some of the things that you would be able to do with other guards within this class.
Yeah, totally fair. And the one thing I will give Belton over Booker is Booker doesn't have that, like, okay, the ball snapped and your nose tackle just flew 3 yards back and ended up on his ass. Like, he doesn't have that drive off the ball. He's more of a, you know, get square, latch on, run your feet, more of an efficient, sustainable blocker, as opposed to like the imposing force, even if those guys are comparable in size. But that's my tier one. This is where I might differ from some people out there, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, because this is a player you wanted to start with, but I do have Donovan Jackson as my number 3 interior offensive lineman. But this is kicking off a list of second-round targets. I personally I'm not quite on board with Donovan Jackson in the first round, but I'm curious if you are.
Yeah, so I have Jackson in the same tier as Tyler Booker, and I will be honest, I think there is a very good chance that my team, the Minnesota Vikings, take Donovan Jackson, whether it's at 24, which would be a little rich, or the idea that I've had in my head, which is trade back with either Cleveland or the Giants so they can come up and get a quarterback, and then select Donovan at the start of the early part of the second round. But Donovan Jackson, to me, is kind of the definition of a balanced guard that should, again, raise the floor. And that's kind of where I stand with Donovan Jackson. Is he is a good run blocker. He is good in the pass pro game. And now he did have to kick out the left tackle this year due to Josh Simmons tearing his patellar, which we discussed earlier. And even when he had to kick out, I mean, this was the left tackle of a national championship winning team. Now, it was unfortunate, and I mean really unfortunate for Donovan, that the first game that he played at left tackle was against none other than Abdul Carter and Penn State. But I mean, he's not going to have to go up against Abdul Carter in the pros. At least he shouldn't. And I think Donovan Jackson, to me, is a really good, solid football player. And I think he has pretty light feet for how big of a guy he is. And just because a guy has light feet, I think there sometimes gets to be this mixed idea that, oh, if you have light feet, that means you're kind of soft. But I don't think he's soft at all, if that makes sense. I think both things can be true. And I think both things are true in Donovan Jackson's case. Now, one other thing that I really did like with him that was not, it's not as common as you may think for NFL draft prospects, but I thought the punches that he had were generally like within the strike zone. You know, he wasn't hitting a guy, you know, right outside the shoulder pad where he needed to hit him, you know, right in the middle of the chest, if you will. I thought they were really consistent. And for me, he is a high floor, low ceiling player that is that should be a starting caliber football player at the NFL level for a long time. So I'm a big Donovan Jackson guy, and I think there's a good chance that my Vikings take him early Friday night.
Yeah. So we're not too far off on him. I just think I'm trying to be a little bit more careful, just like assuming he's going to be a starter right away.
Sure.
Just because there were moments with his play strength where I was just like, yeah, he just doesn't really like dictate his blocks or redirect players or drive guys off the ball. Very sticky run blocker. I don't want to sell him short. Very efficient run blocker in that sense. And he's athletic. You can block wide zone with him. And maybe part of this is I just can't quite shake the tackle tape for him. That's where I started with him, because it was back when I watched him when I was doing like Will Howard for my quarterback rankings back in like February. And at the time I thought he was a tackle because that's where he was kind of listed across the board. But man, he was, I know he like has the flexibility and he was competitive, but man, he was giving up his chest, getting blown up. Like, I was like, man, he doesn't look that strong. So then I was thinking, all right, you move him inside to guard. Like, like, does the skill set really translate? Is he really going to anchor against 330-pound power rushers? He was able to do it. In the 2 games I watched of him at guard, I didn't see him face like great power rushing threats. So that's kind of my question on him, is if he's got to go against, I mean, geez, like the game's best bull rushers, whether it's Quinnen Williams or, those
Vita.
guys that he's Vita Vea, like, is he going to just is the pocket just going to collapse from that standpoint? And can he grip and latch those really good players, as opposed to some of the guys he was going against in college? So like, I do like him. After watching his guard tape, I bumped him up from a 3rd round grade to a 2nd round grade. And definitely see a route where he can get out there in year 1 and be a starter for you. But I don't see him like Zabel and Booker, where I really trust him day 1. So that's where that teardrop came for me on Jackson. These next 2 guys are really fun. I really enjoyed watching both Jonah Savaiinaea and Wyatt Milum. I have the same exact grade on these guys. They're a different flavor, both inside this 2nd tier. Let's start with Jonah Savaiinaea. Excellent build, 6'3.5", 324 pounds, almost 34-inch arms. He played tackle at Arizona. Really athletic guy. He moves left and right really, really well. Just a little across, all over the board in terms of technique. I think in the first 20 snaps of watching the first game that I watched on him, I had a tweet ready to go that was like, wait, why are people not talking about Savaiinaea as like a 1st-round player? Because he looks incredible. I kept it stashed, finished the game, and I was like, all right, I get it now. Like, he's, 1 play is missing with his hands. 1 play is just like losing to an inside counter because he forgets to keep moving his feet. Like, he's 21 years old, clearly, like, he's moved all over the line for Arizona. He's played right tackle, right guard, left tackle, still trying to figure things out. I wanted to see a more consistent mean streak from him in the run game as well, because I felt like he wasn't always tapping into his size and play strength. But I do believe in the developmental upside, because I think the high-end plays are in there in both phases. I think he gets off the ball, and the high-end reps are worth betting on, in my opinion, as a run blocker. And I think that tackle experience should translate pretty damn well to guard, because I felt like his pass protection was pretty steady. He could definitely latch and mirror at tackle, which is obviously going to translate into guard. Where he lost was when he really got left on an island and just didn't quite have that reactionary quickness out in space to move in space and protect out on an island. So I really like the transition into guard. Not thinking about him as a tackle, really, even if he is athletic. I just think it's so clear that his skill set projects better at guard. So that's why he made this list. But as a 2nd-round pick with a ton of upside, absolutely worth betting on, in my opinion.
I'm with you. And the biggest thing with Savaiinaea is I think the potential is there. It's kind of like the one meme where it's like you're searching for diamonds, and it's just like, can you be the team to can you be the team to break through and be able to unleash everything? Because his highs, I'm not going to get into the his highs are the highest in the class. I'm not getting into that discussion, but his highs are certainly up there, and the flashes are certainly there. And I completely understand why you had that train of thought in your head where it was like, hey, like this guy is really good. And whether it was watching Tate McMillan or whoever, but mainly Tate McMillan, but I definitely go back and watch, guys as it's happening, and kind of Noah Fafita at times just to see, where he was throughout the year. But Savaiinaea was definitely flashing at times in both good and bad ways. But the good is really good, and he's definitely to me, a mid to late second round pick with substantial upside. But now, if I'm being honest, if I were a GM, I would probably let somebody else make the pick. But I acknowledge that the potential is there. I don't necessarily know if I'd be the one to bet on that as a GM with my job potentially in the line. But I do agree with everything you're saying. And I would not want to mess with him at tackle at the NFL level. I would just kick him inside and don't worry about offensive tackle there, Jonah. Just play guard and we'll go from there.
Well, it's
at least at the
NFL
level. At the NFL level is where I stand with that. Yeah.
I was just gonna say it's kind of funny, and not to every time we do a show bring it back to the Vikings Packers thing, but it is kind of funny, like how you're wired. You're like, yeah, we can't develop offensive linemen. Like, no, I'm not. I don't want him. Like, go let someone else take him and turn him into a Pro Bowl guard. Because every time we take the Jonah Savaiinaeas of the world, they're a bust. The Packers fan in me is like, yeah, we'll turn this guy into a future $15 million a year player. Like, absolutely. Like, we'll develop this guy just fine. But it does speak to, like, I agree. If you're a certain team that doesn't have a great track record of developing inconsistent players, probably let someone else take them. But if you trust your offensive line coaching, absolutely. So
hey, we have one of the best tackle duos in the league. I want to put some respect on CD and Brian's name.
There you go.
For everybody that doesn't think I'm going to stand back, I got to put some respect on them.
There you go.
My guys.
And then Wyatt Milum, another dude where 20 snaps in, I'm like, yeah, that's Wyatt Teller that I'm watching, not Wyatt Milum, like or Milum. I'm probably butchering his name.
I thought it was Milum is what I thought.
Yeah. But I watched him before I watched Belton. And before I got to Belton, I thought Wyatt Milum had the best knockback ability of any lineman in this draft, just to down block or head up block and blow guys off the ball, just kind of lean into dudes and just be like a genuine impact run blocker where you can be the guy that, you're combo blocking with your tackle and the B gap just vacated for Saquon Barkley, like that type of impact in the game, in the run game. Inconsistent with it because he does have 32.5-inch arms. He's 6'6". So he knows he's got to kind of lay into you and fire into you with his chest, and he's going to whiff. That's the biggest thing I need to see him clean up. He's always going to have his whiffs in the run game. He's going to be a little bit up and down. But if he can improve his strike rate, let's say from right now he's whiffing 40% of the time. If we can get that down to 20-25%, just with a little bit of development, still relatively young, played 4 years at West Virginia, then we're really in business. But if he doesn't work out, that's probably going to be why, because he's just got way too many negative blocks in the run game. But love his tenacity, love that side of things in the run game. And the crazy thing about him is played a lot at tackle. I think he got a couple starts at guard in 2023, maybe. I wasn't able to get tape on those games to go back and check that. But he played his whole career at tackle, got better every single year. And in his final year, he allowed just 6 pressures in 2024. It's about a half a pressure a game, 0 QB hits, 0 QB sacks in 356 snaps at tackle at West Virginia. Pretty crazy considering he is a guy that I obviously project inside with a lack of length, and he's not this incredible athlete. I think he's good enough, but definitely doesn't move great out in space. He's kind of a clunkier, shorter strider. You don't really want to leave him on an island in the NFL, but the fact that he held up that long and didn't let the QB get hit, it's like, maybe in a game, tackle goes down, he could kick him out there, and he could hold up just fine. So I was definitely a fan of him and slapped a second-round grade on him inside tier 2 there.
I'm with you. I really think I mean, we get to a point in the draft process where it's like, oh, this guy's underrated, this guy's underrated. But I think there's a legitimate conversation to be had about Milum being underrated at this point in time.
Hmm.
I look at him as a prospect and simply ask the question again, outside of second level mobility, what is the true weakness in his game? That's kind of what I go back to. I think he does everything at a high enough level to be able to start in the NFL. And I there's over 2,000 snaps of his tape at West Virginia. He played the best out of anybody against Abdul Carter in 2024. Now, if you want to be a Wyatt Milum hater and say, well, it was Abdul Carter's first game at Edge in 2024 and all that, and then get into that conversation, I'm not, I mean, I can't have that conversation. I'm not going to, debate that. Well, Abdul Carter developed and all that. I'm not going into that conversation. But the point is Milum played well against Abdul Carter, and he played well throughout the entire 2024 season. Good football player, and I don't think there's a lot of weaknesses in his game. So this is a guy where we were just talking about Savaiinaea. If I'm taking a guy in the second round, Milum is a guy that I would be comfortable drafting and saying, like, this is a solid player that we know we can count on and we don't have to overthink it. And hopefully he develops into a good starter for the next several years.
Love it. All right. So did you have anybody else that kind of snuck into the tier that we've been talking about so far? Because I drop off after this.
I have Jared Wilson in this tier.
Okay. Why don't you talk about Jared Wilson? I feel like I've been hogging the mic. If you got Jared Wilson in this tier.
Let me go ahead and just pull the notes up real quick. So Jared Wilson is, to me, let's see here. Let's just pull him up. Jared Wilson had a really solid year at Georgia during the 2024 season. He allowed just 6 pressures on over 500 pass blocking snaps. I think he is a proficient run blocker. The biggest thing with Jared Wilson for me is because this is, I would say, in overall, like, I know I talked about the offensive line class earlier being good, and I do think it is good. I don't think the center position specifically is that good within this class, and I think that's very fair to say. But I think he is a really just kind of a technician in terms of the pass blocking game, and like we said, he allowed just 6 pressures all year and 500 pass blocking snaps, and you know what you're going to get. The only thing that I would say with Jared Wilson is I don't think the ceiling is that high with him, but kind of like with Milum, I think you have a good floor there. And anytime for me personally that you can draft a center with a high floor or even any interior offensive lineman with a high floor, I'm going to take a chance on that every single time. Jared Wilson is just 21. He will play his entire rookie season at just 22 years old. So I think for as good of a player as he was during his final season to Georgia, I still think there's some room on the runway for him to grow as a football player. And ultimately, I don't think really, aside from things that aren't coachable, I know he got beat on a couple of stunts a couple of times, and I know there were several plays that Carson Beck did not make that were on him, and a couple of those may have been on Jared Wilson because he didn't pick up a stunt or he didn't pick up something that he should have in front of Carson Beck. But I don't think that that's entirely uncoachable, and it wasn't, to me, that drastic of a negative on the scouting report the way some people want to make it out to be. Overall, I think he's a early to mid third round prospect that you could start in year 2.
Okay, so
regularly.
This is interesting because, like, my grade on him is the same, and he is my next player. So, like, we see him similarly in the sense of value, but I actually see him differently as a player. I don't love him out there early. I think what you said about the pass blocking, I agree with. It's just, let's be honest, like, it's not that impressive to be a high efficiency pass blocker as a center because it's like all double teams basically, especially at the college level where it's a lot of 3-man fronts that you're facing and stuff. So there wasn't a ton of isolated one-on-one reps with him, and I do think the anchor is a question if you are going to isolate him. So I had two things with him on a negative side, but I'll start on a positive note. I do actually see him as a pretty high upside player, as this incredibly athletic move center. Think of I don't think he's Tyler Linderbaum coming out, obviously, but in that mold, upside wise, undersized guy, you don't want him left on an island in pass protection, but you're hoping he can become a great run blocker and you can get him on the move, maybe closer to what Oh, the Travis Kelce replacement for Philadelphia.
Cam
Played
Jurgens?
guard and center. Cam Jurgens. Yeah, maybe closer to like a Cam Jurgens coming out. But I see a couple reps where the athleticism is insane, and his athletic testing was crazy. 4.8, 4.40, 32-inch vertical jump. He had the best short shuttle. No, there's one other guy that had a better short shuttle who I still have to watch, Caleb Rogers out of Texas Tech. But that's kind of the ideal scenario for him. 1-year starter as a center, kicked inside, was a backup guard for 3 years, then earned that starting center job. I think he's smart. I think he does a pretty good job with blitz pickup with some of the misses in there, being a first-year center, of course. But couple concerns. Number one is I think something that he will get better at, and that is that I just don't know that he's fully comfortable getting out of his stance while snapping the football as a wide zone blocker. Like that's the system I project him into as a smaller guy, 6'3", 310 pounds, is like one of these wide zone Shanahan style centers. When they ran wide zone, he really struggled to reach block because it felt like there was just a little bit of a lag between the snap and going. I think that's very much something he can improve on, but out the gate, like, I don't know that he's going to be ready to kind of reach a 2-tech as a center and tap into that athleticism consistently. The other side that I don't know is developable or not is the subpar play strength for him. He's more kind of out there to get in your way right now as a run blocker as opposed to moving you. And he's kind of filled out. Like when you look at him, he looks the part. He looks, 32.5-inch arms are like filled out. He looks, kind of filled out in the pants, but he doesn't play very strong. So I hope he can add more functional play strength, but I don't know for sure that he can. So that's the one thing where I'm like, if he can't really develop that, I don't know that you can necessarily get him out there because I think he will get thrown around a good bit. But did have him as a 3rd-round guy. Love the upside. And then let's stick with Georgia inside this tier. We're getting towards the end here. But Tate Ratledge out of Georgia did make this list for me. Really tough dude, good play strength. Just a little uncoordinated in my opinion. Like the consistency to marry his strikes with his feet felt like he found himself out of position and unbalanced a good bit, but a lot of power in his upper half to move guys. And if you can just kind of marry his upper body and his lower body a little bit more consistently, coaches rave about his toughness and his leadership. There's still hope. And he tested really well, but because I didn't quite see the coordination as an athlete, I don't think he quite plays up to the 4.97 40 and the 32-inch vertical jump. How did you see Ratledge?
First off, I could not agree more on the athletic testing part, the last point that you made. I thought, whenever you have a guy that's naturally as big as Tate Ratledge is, there's not going to be a lot of comparisons in just because there's not that many players that are that tall. So one comparison that I liked for Ratledge was a lighter version and kind of a much lighter version of Joe Tippmann, who's currently on the Jets. Mm-hmm. But look, one thing that I want to point out with Tate Ratledge is there's a lot of good with this game, but what kind of concerns me is the taller you get, as cool as that may look coming off the bus, that doesn't help interior offensive linemen. So I like Tate. I like the idea of Tate Ratledge, and I texted you about this with another prospect, not in today's video, but I like the idea of Tate Ratledge. I don't know if the execution at the NFL level is going to actually happen, and that's kind of where I stand with him, where I think on paper he can be a really good player, but I question his ceiling at the NFL level. I would like him to be kind of a backup guard, a guy that hopefully you can develop. But even with that, Tate Ratledge is going to be 24 years old throughout his rookie season. So really, how much of a ceiling is there? I think he is a depth player, and there's nothing wrong with depth players because not everybody can be the Quentin Nelsons of the world. But I like him for what he is, and I go back to when I say I like a player for what they are, they're generally not a superstar. And I like the idea of Tate Ratledge. I'm just not the biggest fan of him, and I would definitely let somebody else draft him and wish him the best.
So what kind of like round? It sounds like he's kind of in the next tier.
Yeah, I would have him Like definitely early day 3, definitely early day,
Yeah.
late 3, early day 4. And again, wish him the best. I question the ceiling. I question just how, I mean, that's the biggest thing. I question the ceiling, and then where he is as a player right now, to me, is not good enough to start regularly. So there's ceiling questions, there's floor. I mean, he's a depth piece to me.
Yeah, I think it's totally fair. And obviously this is a guy that's getting pretty good buzz. Like, you'll see him in a lot of like second round mock drafts. That's definitely too rich for me. It's way too rich for you. I guess I mostly agree. I think the tape it just left a lot to be desired in terms of staying square to blockers and being consistent. But I do see probably a little bit more upside in there than maybe you see, just because I do think the core strength and the strength in his arms to like redirect guys is really good, and the ability to knock guys off the ball is there. And it's the fact that he did test well. It's just like, can we coach this up and somehow square you up a little bit better against your blocks?
I hope so. I hope he can. I think that's good, but like when it transitions to the NFL, that's where I have my concerns. It's not that it's not translatable, because it obviously is, but it's more of like, okay, are we doing that against? And I know he played in the SEC. That's obviously, it's not a competition level thing, but it's just more of a, can we do this on a consistent level as a 24-year-old rookie, and then as a 25-year-old second player, when the reality is teams move on from guys that are 25, 26 years old if they're not already a good player at the snap of a finger. So again, I like the idea, I just don't like the potential execution, is where I am with that.
Yeah, I think it's very, very fair for a guy that, like, when he's tall, he's kind of like overarching on guys, and he's always in these like awkward angles where he's trying to like grab a shoulder and twist you and almost like wrestle in that sense. But like when you're going against crafty, incredible run defenders at the next level
that are also 4 inches that are also 4 inches shorter than you and win the leverage battle by default,
and quicker with their feet.
Right. And also, the best at their game, they're the best in the league, the best at what they do. That's where my concerns with Tate Ratledge come into play. Big time.
I think that's totally fair. All right. And then just a quick shout out to the last guy in my third tier here, Miles Frazier out of LSU. I watched him. He was one of the first players I watched. So like, he's a guy that I definitely got to refer to the notes on him, but 6'5.5", 317 pounds, 33-inch arms, like kind of looks the part type. He was another guy where like the tape looked pretty good. 5 years of legitimate starting experience, 3,000 career snaps, solid overall play strength, anchor and leg drive, high intensity run blocker, generally plays fast with the right blocking demeanor, doesn't second guess himself even if he's wrong sometimes. But I did write down that he does, let guys cross his face. He'll fall off blocks. He'll miss assignments. He's a guy that does miss with his hands relatively consistently. So there was just a lot of up and down with his overall game, which is pretty in line with Ratledge. But I do have him kind of like a tier within the tier below Wilson and Ratledge. But someone that end of third round, early fourth round was the grade I had on him. So that was relatively efficient, hour and a half for two position groups. But just a couple last guys here, because we are, if we're all here an hour and a half into this show, we are the real football junkies. There are some names in this draft that are still interesting that I think a lot of you guys would like our thoughts on. Just a couple guys, especially one that we got to talk about because he's in a lot of like second round mock drafts that we haven't talked about, and that's Marcus Mbow. You said you had some notes on him. I'm very curious for this conversation, especially. So you go ahead with Marcus Mbow out of Purdue.
So my notes here, I like him a lot for who he is. And again, I go back to, that doesn't mean I think he's going to be a second round player. When I first started watching him, I was like, oh man, we have like a developmental early day 3 guy. Like I can't wait to see, maybe that 90 to 100 range. And then I look up and see that they have like the Commanders taking him at pick 61 in a mock draft. Yeah. And that's kind of where I just throw the towel in. And that's where I get frustrated for Marcus Mbow because I don't think he's a top 60 player in this class. And I get frustrated with guys that have entirely unfair expectations placed on them. And the reality is I think he is kind of a worse Josh Conerly, who we discussed earlier within the tackles part. He is very athletic. He is always going to have the anchor concerns unless he puts on, 15 or 20 pounds. But I like the idea of developing him as time goes on. But I think he is, he plays with fire in his game. And that was one of the things that I liked was, despite him not necessarily being that Anthony Belton, 340 pounds, he still plays, kind of like it's his last game every time, or like it's he's fighting to make the roster. Like he's fighting to be that 53rd guy on the roster. And I generally, high effort players are guys that I want to bet on, that I want to succeed. And he's exactly that. Now, like I said, there's also a couple of times on tape where you got a couple of guys on a snatch trap, and it's generally he's generally on an upward trajectory. Now I do think he will kick inside at the NFL level. There's a reason that Marcus has him in his interior offensive lineman.
32 and a quarter inch arms.
Yeah. But for him being 22 years old and for him showing the flashes that he did, the anchor concerns for me, like that limits how high I think he should be drafted, especially right now, because you are realistically a year away from him starting at least regularly, because I think he has to put on, like I said, at least 10 to 15 pounds just to, get to average NFL or even close to average NFL, anchoring or strength, if you will. So that part concerns me with Marcus Mbow. But like I said, there is a lot to like in his game. I don't like the fact that a lot of people see him as a top 50 or 60 player in this class. I think that is, in a lot of ways, setting a guy who kind of needs a developmental year up for failure along the interior offensive line.
So what round would you take him?
I would like anywhere from that 90 to 110 range. So late 3, early 4 is where I would ideally like to take him. And it's a flyer. It is a flyer. Like, hey, like we already have 3 picks. Let's give a chance.
So we see him fairly similarly. It's just I have a 5th round grade on him. I think he's a real like dart throw type, kind of more in that category with guys those names we shouted out with, like, Jalen Rivers, Carson Vincent. Like, so when we were at the Senior Bowl, I was completely blind, like very late to the process. 2 days into it, I heard that he was in the top 75 on the consensus board. And I'm like, that's the worst player here. Like, he is getting demolished out here. Like I've many, like 4 or 5 times, I was like, oh man, this Purdue guy, priority free agent type. So I was very surprised to hear people liked him. And then I was excited to visit the tape because I was like, well, I really hope I'm wrong. The idea of him is very exciting. And you see the athleticism. I get it. Like, he moves better than most tight ends do. And I'm a Naked and Afraid fan. I'm like, can we just throw him on an episode of Naked and Afraid and just bring him back in August and just have him play tight end? Because can he catch? Like, I just don't see the play strength to play offensive line. I don't know that if I've ever done this. I have an F grade for his play strength. I think he, not only the anchor, I don't even think the anchor is the worst part of his game. When he punches guys, nothing happens. Like, they just don't move. And it's just like, that's already hurting his game at the college level. His tape wasn't, I was hoping his tape would at least be good. And I just didn't really think his tape was good. I think the athleticism, the effort shows there, but I think it ends up really hurting his feet because he'll throw a punch, but typically the idea of throwing a punch is to create some displacement, to create some knockback, but it just isn't moving guys. And then when they begin their pass rush move or they want to do an inside counter, his feet actually weren't in position because he just wasn't able to displace guys to set himself up with his lower half. So like, I just felt like guys were kind of having whatever they wanted with him on an island, especially at tackle. So there was a few reps where I was just like, this guy, he can't play tackle. Like, he can't really survive out on an island. Now the upside's there as a developmental center. Teach him how to snap, get him on the move in that kind of move blocking center role for certain systems. Protect him in pass protection where he's not getting one-on-one. But for me, he was more of a 5th round prospect that I'm certainly going to let someone else take in the top 100 of the draft. Okay, one last guy I got to get your thoughts on. You watched him. I'm going to watch him tonight. Willie Lampkin, the 5'10" lineman out of North Carolina. What'd you think of him, and where would you draft him?
So let me preface this with, he might be the definition of guys that I like, that I don't think are that great. I like the idea of Willie Lampkin, but he's 5'11", 290. 5'11" is obviously, that's the first thing that you're going to see with Lampkin. But he plays with, I mean, he has a sturdy anchor, at least I thought. He also, the biggest thing that I really like with Lampkin that is translatable to the NFL level is this guy plays with passion amongst the best in the class. And that's one thing that I can always get behind. In terms of how he actually, was as a player, if you will, or in terms of numbers, he allowed just 8 pressures on 473 pass blocking snaps. Now, you mentioned earlier that the numbers in college football are always going to be inflated a little bit, just because there's a lot of screens, and just because, you can inflate the numbers in college more than you can for NFL offensive linemen. But I didn't think that he got beat too many times. Now, there were a couple of reps in particular where he got knocked back, and that's unfortunately going to happen with the short arms, given that he is 5'11", and given that he's going to have some athletic limitations, obviously. But I like the idea of Willie Lampkin, and the biggest concerns that I have with him are obviously going to be size related. But to me, in terms of where he was as a football player from a technique standpoint, there definitely could have been some improvement. I mean, this is a late day 3 prospect we're talking about. He is a fun player by every means to, sit and theorize about. If he makes it, I would kind of be surprised if he makes a 53-man roster at this point.
Yeah.
But he is a fun player to talk about, and that's the best way that I could describe it. It's not every year you have a 5'11", 290-pound offensive lineman. And I would say to go in with low expectations is what I would say. But he's a fun player.
One of the most memorable Senior Bowl moments that will go, for a long, long time is him going up against 6'8" Deion Walker and winning.
Stopping him.
Yeah. So I'm definitely excited to watch him. He's probably going to be like, the morning of like the live stream on day 3, like before we go live, I'll probably load up some Willie Lampkin tape just to kind of see a little bit of it last minute. Hey, I never thought Aaron Brewer at 6'1", 280 pounds would make it in the league, and he's a useful center for the Dolphins. So you never know. All right, Garrett, you were very gracious with your time. Thank you so much for coming on to talk offensive line. Very enjoyable show. What else you got going on to tell the good people about before we get out of here?
Yeah, I have a couple of videos coming out this week. I have a couple of draft dream fits. I have a video that I'll be having a guest on for. It'll be the just prospects the media is wrong on. And then I'll have one final mock draft prior to the big day. So loaded week, arguably busiest week of the year for NFL content creators. And I'm looking forward to it. So appreciate you having me on, Marcus. And you guys can find all the work at Football Analysis.
Awesome. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys for the next video. Peace out.